of emails with you that were sent by the superintendent of Montgomery County, Maryland schools, a man who calls himself Dr. Jack R. Smith. He sent them to the parents who placed their kids under his care. The emails are fascinating. They're a true showcase of his values. To Dr. Jack R. Smith, the worst crime imaginable is not sexual violence against a child, but naughty language he considers intolerant. In an email sent just today, for example, he seems more upset by the aftermath of the alleged crime than by the rape itself. He lectures parents who have voiced their horror about the attack, warning them that, quote, far too many have crossed the line with racist, xenophobic calls and emails. Not only are those calls offensive, he says, but they're also somehow illegal. As he puts it, they will not be tolerated, and they'll be reported to the police in Montgomery County, who presumably have never heard of the First Amendment. He speaks much more harshly about xenophobia than he does about sexual assault of a child. And it's not the only email he sent like this. His colleagues in the Montgomery County school system have sent a ton of them. 1 week after the November election, his district had every principal send an email that warned hate speech, something they never bothered to define, would be punished severely. They urged kids to report cases of offensive messages to the proper authorities. Last Friday night, the very day after the alleged rape in Rockville, Smith sent a school-wide email lamenting, on the basis of no actual evidence, that, quote, hate-based incidents are on the rise across this country, something a lot of people say but no one actually proves. And he urges students to participate in a contest denouncing hate, a term that apparently encompasses any political expression that school administrators disagree with. Well, none of this has anything to do with education, of course. It's a political indoctrination, and it's done by force. They're not even trying to hide it. In January, this district took a stand for illegal immigration. They sent an email letting parents know that Montgomery County, quote, remains a welcoming learning environment for all students, regardless of immigration status. Teachers, the email continued, will do nothing to report illegal immigrants. Now, you'd think that somewhere, someone in the sprawling and highly paid Montgomery County education complex would pause and regret sending an email like that, given that an illegal alien now stands accused of raping a child in one of their school bathrooms. But apparently there are no second thoughts in Rockville. It's full steam ahead with the same old diversity agenda at all costs. And by the way, if you don't like it, shut up or we'll call the cops. Well, the powers that be in Montgomery County certainly don't want you thinking critically about the country's immigration laws. Fortunately, we're not going to listen to them tonight. Does the Rockville case expose the critical flaws of this country's immigration laws? We're joined now by Dan Stein. He's president of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. We're also joined by Alex Little, a criminal defense attorney and former assistant U.S. attorney. It's great to see you both.
Good evening.
So, Alex, the obvious question, which I just posed to the defense lawyer, is that this crime could have been prevented. Nobody really doubts that. If one of the men, and probably both, but one for sure at the center of this, had been deported as he was supposed to be. But the government didn't deport him, and now here we stand with a child claiming she was raped. This is inherently about immigration, and it's unenforcement in a law for political reasons.
No, Tucker, I fundamentally disagree. I mean, the chain of causation that you're laying out is so far attenuated. I mean, I had cases as a prosecutor where a defendant would say, I did this because I needed to pay for my mother's cancer treatment, and he committed a burglary or an armed robbery. Is that case about health care reform, about whether we're going to reform Obamacare? No. The individual committed a violent crime. And here, the causation is what happened in that bathroom.
But he wouldn't have been. He wasn't supposed to be here. Authorities fell down on the job. They didn't do what they were sworn to do, what they had sworn to do, because of political pressure. He wouldn't have been, I mean, we wouldn't be here at all. This is not attenuated. This is direct.
You know, I think if that's what this case is about, then I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. We have an individual who's a potential rape victim. She's not the only rape victim in this country, and I think it's important that we focus on all of them. I represent rape victims. I don't want to tell rape victims that one rape is more important or less important or part of a broader narrative because the race or national origin or immigration status.
Oh, stop. I'm not going to sit here for that. No one's attacking his race. That's ridiculous.
Well, no, but it's the immigration status.
I'm certainly not. I'm just saying, look, Dan, here's what separates this rape from a lot of rapes, and immigrants are not the only people who commit rape. I'm not suggesting that because it's not true. I'm really saying this is one that could have been prevented. That's all I'm saying.
Look, what's happening in Montgomery County is happening across the country, which is that parents, concerned citizens, are asking why. I mean, what has happened to the American mind that we've seen a decline in the intellect, that we can't put together the pieces of a puzzle to figure out what are these guys doing here? Why are they in the same classroom or the same school with a 14-year-old girl when these guys are 17, 18? Why are they in the 9th grade? How did they get in through the border? Who actually created the environment that let this all happen? And of course, there's a chain of causation. 1982, Supreme Court. Biggest federal mandate in history, Plyler versus Doe. Everybody here illegally has to go to public school. Then, Senator Feinstein, Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, so-called Wilberforce language that says a law designed to protect traffickers from children from traffickers, is now being used by smugglers. And lo and behold, what we're now facing is a big battle between Donald Trump, who's trying to crack down, and many Republicans, and the Democratic Party and Democrat-controlled states and counties setting themselves at defiance to the Trump administration to say, not only are we going to promote the concept of illegal immigration, we're going to do what we can to obstruct justice. There's no reason that these two guys should have been in the country. They came in here illegally.
Well,
They were released. They never really had a hearing date for deportation because basically the Democrat Party position on this now is unless you commit a dangerous felony, you shouldn't be deported. Well, you know what that means? You're going to have people here illegally who are committing felonies who have no criminal record.
But I would correct you there, though, and pose this question to Alex. I think that pro-immigration advocates would have more authority if they agreed with the president that if you commit a felony that you can be deported, and yet they argue against that. They're against the deportation of criminal aliens.
That's the law,
Why
Tucker.
is
That's
that?
absolutely the law. I mean, if you commit a felony, even if you're a green card holder, you can be deported.
Aware. What's the law? You're not supposed to be here illegally anyway. But when Trump says we're going to deport them, all of a sudden, you know, it's crystal knocked. Like, what is that? Why wouldn't they say, yeah, we don't want criminal aliens here?
No,
but they don't say that.
I don't think people disagree about that. I think the question is where do you place the enforcement and where do you focus your priorities? And I think here we've seen some troubling signs that ICE is not focusing their priorities on dangerous criminals when they're setting up outside churches or outside hospitals or homeless shelters. The very disturbing case of a domestic violence victim who was taken into custody after reporting her abusive husband. And so when you have immigration authorities doing that, I think there's a real debate about whether that's the right approach or whether you do take folks who are violent felons, take them off the street and deport them.
Which basically, though, what people are saying is just don't enforce the law. So like, why not just change the law in Congress? That's kind of my question.
Because it's a bankrupt idea that you shouldn't be deported unless you commit an independent felony.
Right.
Because in the end, you're creating a swamp of illegal activity. And you don't really know the identity of somebody if they're here illegally. And all the Supreme Court said in 1982 was, if a child is here illegally, they ought to be enrolled in public school until they're deported. But that doesn't mean the school doesn't have a responsibility to verify residency or status. I know all about the Montgomery County school system, Tucker. They do not verify real identity. They don't care about the actual age of these guys. That's why they were in the school. And I mean, basically, Montgomery County is running a segregated school system. You look at performance and you can see how people self-segregate within the school system. And Rockville used to be a great school, but now it's kind of declining because the Montgomery County politics are creating this. Anyway,
I know, unfortunately, we're out of time.
What we have to do is make sure we sustain Larry Hogan's veto, Governor Hogan's veto of the Trust Act. That's everything what we're going to try to do at FAIR now is to stop that bill in the state assembly.
Dan, thank you. Alex, thank you. Well, recently we decided, here's part of what we've taken a more detailed look at the link between immigrants and crime in this country. It was really interesting. Here's part of what we found. When Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president of the United States, he triggered untold numbers of journalists and pundits by expressing his thoughts on Mexican immigrants.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you.
An exclusive analysis of data collected by the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency largely vindicates the president's claim that U.S. immigration policies are contributing to crime in the country. Data from each of the DEA's 20 domestic divisions shows that of the 767 fugitives with known birthplaces, 83% of them were born outside of this country. In effect, the U.S. has imported a foreign criminal class that operates a multi-billion-dollar drug trade within our borders. Perhaps more surprising is what's happening within America's most violent cities, where foreign fugitives dominate the most wanted lists. In violence-plagued Detroit, for example, just 7% of the DEA's fugitives are listed as born in the United States. DEA divisions in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Dallas don't list a single American-born fugitive on their most wanted lists.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense.
One counterpoint to these statistics is that drug traffickers are more likely to be from outside the country given the nature of the business. There's also the fact that foreign criminals might be more difficult to track down and therefore more likely to remain on most wanted lists. But that does not change the fact that there is a strong link between lax border enforcement and the black market for drugs. But beyond the drug trade, federal fugitives remain disproportionately foreign-born. Federal crime statistics, for example, show that even though just 13% of America's population is foreign-born, Mexican citizens alone make up more than 14% of the entire federal prison population. One of the most disturbing statistics uncovered was that 36% of fugitives on the FBI's Crimes Against Children Most Wanted list were born outside of this country. Those fugitives include Mexican-born Hugo Sanchez, an alleged serial rapist who preys upon young children, Luis Tejada of El Salvador, wanted for distributing child pornography, and Mexican-born Jose Antonio Barroso, who allegedly raped a 5-year-old. Well, none of this is news to Ann Coulter, who spent years warning about the immigrant crime connection and been reviled for it. She's been a fan of President Trump, but she did go after him on Twitter 2 days ago, saying this about his falling approval rating. Quote, Trump got elected for the wall, deportations, and trade. Instead, he's doing tax cuts and Obamacare light. No surprise. Ann Coulter joins us now. Ann, thanks a lot for coming on. So
Thanks for having me.
That tweet got a lot of attention. You've written a book in support of Donald Trump. I think it's fair to say you're supportive of his program. But I think what you were saying was he's not putting the priorities of his campaign at the top of his priorities as president list, and that's a problem.
Yeah, no, they seem to be Paul Ryan's priorities, and also just the standard GOP corporatist stuff. What made Donald Trump stand apart from the crowd and apart from the crowd from every presidential candidate for the last 20 years was immigration, trade, infrastructure, building a wall. Obviously, that was very, very popular. A lot of people haven't been listened to all this time. And look, I like tax cuts. I'd love to have my taxes cut, but 50% of the people don't even pay taxes.
Right.
I think the bigger problem now is jobs. And I will not hold the Emperor God Trump responsible for this Obamacare light bill, but oh, for Pete's sake, am I the last person in America who understands the free market? Actually, Sean Spicer was very good today explaining to idiot reporters that getting rid of mandated coverage doesn't mean insurance companies won't cover it. It means, Ann won't be required to pay for 15 services, actually probably more like 50 services that I have no interest in. But to listen to them all talking about how, I don't know, Congress is going to give us these things. No, Congress can give us nothing. The free market can give us things. And they're coming up with the premiums? No, I think who would be better to come up with a premium? Someone whose business it is and needs to come up with a good premium to compete, to get my business.
No, good question.
And who has disease specialists and actuarial specialists or politicians in Washington.
So you're hearing, speaking of politicians in Washington, you're hearing some of them and an awful lot of school district officials here in Montgomery County say there's no connection at all between our immigration policy and this crime that apparently happened last Friday in Rockville. You're laughing.
I am. It is just stunning, this argument that, oh, well, a lot of things. Criminals tell me I had to rape that girl because my mother wouldn't give me $1. Well, okay, but we can't control whether his mother gave him $1. Immigration policy is the definition of something we can control. Who comes into the country? No, there are all these Americans who wouldn't have dead children, who wouldn't be raped, who wouldn't be dead themselves or undergoing facial reconstruction surgery or be addicted to heroin, but for our immigration policy. That's something we can change. Let's change it.
Well, what's interesting, though, is that there seems to be a profound, and we could do an hour on this, but quickly, misalignment between what the president ran on and what the Republican leadership stands for. So on Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House website, not to single him out, but on his website right now, he says we need to encourage legal immigration. Now, that's a real position, but it's not really consistent with what the president ran on, from what I can tell.
No, and Paul Ryan was the vice presidential candidate of a losing presidential ticket. So I think Republicans ought to be moving to Trump's position rather than Trump moving to their position. I mean, I think what Congress ought to be doing now, I would like them to pass a an Obamacare repeal that says there shall be a free market in health insurance so that those of us who are healthy and able to pay can buy a plan any normal human would want. Start with that, 80% of the country, and then you can do the welfare cases. But if they're not going to do that, how about, they love comprehensive immigration bills, how about a comprehensive bill simply with most of what Trump wants to do on immigration he can do because he's president of the United States, but look at how the courts have reacted. Just let Congress go through and endorse everything Trump wants to do.
Well, that's right.
Wall.
I mean, and by the way, our laws are supposed to come from Congress, keep in mind, as you know. Ann Coulter, thanks for joining us.